to commence?
You can stop the share, please.
Are we ready to commence?
And Sabha, please, Sabha Taha, please, we don't like people to share anything unless they are permitted. Sabha Taha, please stop presenting. Organizers, you can deal with some accounts like here, Sabha Taha. She's sharing without permission. She is presenting.
Okay, I think we're ready to commence. Dr. Amin?
1 minute, please.
Fine.
Dr. Abdurrahman, can you please stop presenting?
Yes, Dr. Amin, I stopped. I already stopped.
Okay, fine. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We came here at 9:30.
So very good morning to everyone. I would like to request Mr. Pascal to initiate the session of today, please.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 2 of the international virtual conference titled Language Teaching and Learning in ESL, EFL Settings, Status and Prospects. I would like to request that all participants take a moment to kindly check that their microphones are muted. Thank you. We shall commence with a brief recording from Professor Abdul Karim Zabiba, welcoming and thanking the gathering. Professor Zabiba is the Honorable Vice Rector for Higher Studies and Scientific Research at Thamar University, Yemen. The recording may kindly be played now.
Make it vibrant because the mic is on. Yes, Mr. Abdurrahman, please, the recording.
Dr. Abdul Rahman, you're muted. Can you please unmute and play the recording?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's with Dr. Abdurrahman. Sound, please. Dr. Abdurrahman, there is no sound.
Dr. Abdul Rahman, you're muted. Dr. Abdul Rahman, kindly unmute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning everyone. On behalf of the leadership of Higher Studies and Scientific Research at Thamar University, I am glad to be invited to the declaration of your international conference held today on language teaching and learning in the two universities. Kerala, India, and Thamar, Yemen. Thamar University, we are looking for strengthening relationship between our universities in the area of scientific research, exchange expertise in the area of teaching classes, and all scientific scopes. I wish you good luck and success and hope that such conferences will be duplicated in the future between our universities. Thank you.
We thank Professor Zabiba for his kind remarks. Now, to make some preliminary announcements and give guidelines for the day, I invite Dr. Amin Ali Al-Jamil of the Faculty of Education, Thamar University, Yemen. Dr. Amin, please.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very good morning. Namaskaram. I would request Dr. Abdurrahman to stop presenting and the sharing. Then I would like to welcome all the gathering, all the wonderful delegates, presenters, chairpersons, key speakers, and everyone. Today, Monday, September 21st, 2020, is our second and final day in the International Conference in Language Teaching and Learning in English as a second language and English as a foreign language settings, status, and prospects. Yesterday, we had a wonderful day, wonderful officials from the two universities, Thamar University in Yemen and Kerala University here in India. And they have inaugurated the conference, and the Pro-Vice Chancellor, P.P. Ajay Kumar, has delivered a wonderful lecture as he is specialized in English language teaching. And then we proceeded to the 3 plenary sessions in which 3 experts from Egypt, India, and China have delivered wonderful presentations on their topics. And then we proceeded to have 3 technical sessions in which 3 experts chaired the session and 12 researchers and educators presented their topics. Today, we are going to commence our program from now until 5 p.m. in which we will have the plenary session, Professor Lal, and also Mansi, Professor Lal from India, and Mansi, she will speak from US, University of Texas. They will speak in this session. And then we will have 5 technical sessions in which we will have 20 researchers and educators in the field of language teaching and learning. They will present on various topics. So today it will be purely academic, and we would like to request all our wonderful participants to be with us until the end. And those who, for example, attended 10% only yesterday, they can compensate today because the certificates will be issued for everyone, securing a minimum of 70% of attendance, and that will be tracked from Google reports, Google Meet report. So the PowerPoints will be shared to those whom we are going to issue certificates. We will send to their emails. And today we are going to start our wonderful day, as they say here in Kerala, Adipuli, which means beautiful and nice, with the Adipuli professor, Professor Lal. So I would like to give the mic now to Mr. Pascal to invite the person who will introduce Professor Lal. Thank you very much for everyone, and wish you an enjoyable learning experience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amin. As Dr. Amin mentioned, we now commence the formal sessions of day 2 of this conference with plenary sessions delivered by specially invited speakers. The 4th plenary lecture, the first of which we'll start today, shall be delivered by Professor Lal C.A. Now to introduce Professor Lal, I invite Dr. Vijayalakshmi T., who is an assistant professor and head of the Department of Thamar Language at the University of Kerala. Dr. Vijayalakshmi, Madam, I invite you, please.
Thank you. Vanakkam, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are doing well this morning. Vanakkam is a Tamil language expression to greet the people at any time of the day. That's why I opt this expression, Vanakkam. I'm privileged to be a part of this international conference. Before I introduce the key speaker, I would like to say some words about the English language teaching. Process of English language teaching and learning is not new to us. Its roots can be traced even back to the period of colonization. But this process is still continuing all over the world with fresh and innovative ideas and techniques. As a Tamil language teacher, I see the English language as an arrogatively dominant and also magically attractive. English is like a flood which swallows all the languages, cultures, people into it and flows towards the Western world. The flexibility to accept all the other language, vocabulary, expression, usage, and everything makes English as a rich language. But in the age of globalization, English becomes inevitable as a language which connects the whole world. Learning English is synonymous to learning world. I always admire this beautiful language. ELT techniques and approach for a girl learning English in China and Kerala is entirely different. It should be treated differently. I appreciate the fact that you people are focusing on these significant issues. I should congratulate Dr. Shanavas, our beloved professor, for conceiving this wonderful conference, and also the organizing secretaries, Dr. Amin Ali, Dr. Bhaskar, and the team for their dedicated involvement. Now I would like to introduce Professor Lal, the key speaker of this day. Professor Lal CA is a professor of English, School of Distance Education, University of Kerala. He got his MA, MPhil, PhD degrees from University of Kerala. Apart from these degrees, he has so many diplomas and certificates from other side India, that is from English and Foreign Language University, University of Maryland, University of Oregon, and etc. The special thing is he has a considerable experience in training aspirants of IELTS, and he has teaching experience since 1993. He has been coordinator of many number of development programs related to MA, BA, online courses and other things. And he is a member of many academic bodies. He visited many more countries. He received a number of awards. He published several scholarly papers and books, organized a number of conferences, national and international conferences, and I am sure he will be an apt person to handle this session. On behalf of the conference team, now I would like to invite and welcome Dr. Professor Lal to enlighten us with his vast knowledge on this topic. And I also cordially welcome the participants of this conference. I hope you friends have a resourceful session, and thanking you once again for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much.
Audible?
Yes, Professor
Thank
Lal,
you
you're
very
audible.
much.
Please go ahead.
A special thanks to Dr. Vijay Lakshmi for the nice words of introduction, both about me and about the topic we are discussing. And thanks to Dr. Amin and Dr. Shanavas for organizing and for inviting me, and Dr. Bhaskar for coordinating the whole thing. And my warm greetings from this part of the world, which is Kerala. It's raining outside. I have locked the windows to keep the sound out. So welcome to, it's a pleasure being with you. Rather than welcoming you to listen to me, I would say I would welcome myself to be with you this morning. So let me share my screen with your permission. I hope my screen is now visible to you.
Perhaps we can give it a moment, sir. It's not yet come on.
Yes, yes.
It's now coming up. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Okay, so the topic that I thought of sharing with you today, this is not going to be a plenary talk or anything very formal. My idea is to share with you certain concerns which I have felt over the last several years during my trainings with sessions with teachers, and also during my sessions of teaching English with learners of different levels. Also, the insights I would like to share with you have been drawn while creating study material, curriculum, etc. for adult learners, particularly related to the literacy mission of Kerala. So, yeah, so we will go to the first slide, in which I talk about learning a second language. This conference is on ESL, English as a second language, and all the people who are attending are in one way or the other related to teaching English or another language as a second language. But still, let me begin clarifying the concept of second language. By second language, I mean a language that we learn after we finish learning our mother tongue, the language that we learn later. Do forgive me if there are spelling issues in my presentation, which might have happened at times because the software I use doesn't have a spell check highlighter. So I might have missed some issues here and there, but that is incidentally. So second language teaching is a serious issue. We have been doing it, as Dr. Vijayalakshmi said, we have been doing it for quite a long time now in India. Since independence, even we have established our own. I'm talking specifically about India and Kerala, though I know the audiences are from different parts of the world. But what I say may not be totally alien to your circumstances, except for contexts where English is a first language, that is in England or USA, Australia, New Zealand. But in most other countries where English is either a foreign language or a second language, whatever I say would be of relevance. Well, so the one interesting, though we have been teaching English as a second language, teaching Hindi as a second language, teaching Arabic as a second language for so many years, there are a few concerns which we often overlook. And that perhaps is a reason for the deficiencies in the delivery that we often experience. Talking about English in particular, we know that often we have the complaint in India, in Kerala in particular, which is the context I know more, that even after so many years of learning English or learning Hindi for that matter, now in this slide I'm concerned with any second language, the second languages that we encounter in this part of the world are evidently Hindi and English, though in some border districts of Kerala we have Tamil too, okay. So regarding second language, we often take it for granted. But the fact of the matter is that the process of that are involved, the cognitive processes in particular, that are involved in the learning, or rather, to be more precise, in acquiring a second language is still not very clear. So that is, I'm saying this as an introduction because my topic is teacher development, and why there should be a kind of teacher development. The primary reason is that the processes involved in acquiring second language is still not totally known. There are so many gray areas, and interestingly, in a YouTube video, Professor David Crystal, the renowned linguist, says that half humorously that teaching a second language, teaching English, for example, teaching English can be even more difficult than performing a neurosurgery, because a neurosurgeon knows more about his job than the English teacher does. It's not the fault of the English teacher. It is the problem is with the general lack of clarity about the processes involved in acquiring a second language. So, such being the case, let me elaborate on the present scene of teaching English in India and many parts of the world, we often talk about English as if it were a language like Latin or Sanskrit. In India, we talk about learning Sanskrit, which is a good thing. But the difference is that Sanskrit or Latin are languages of scholarship. They are languages which do not grow anymore. They are traditional, they are classical languages, and we have their children, which we use now. For example, the children of Latin are spoken in different parts of Europe, like French or Romanian, and the many children of Sanskrit, like Marathi or Hindi or Gujarati, all we have are spoken in different parts of India. But these mother languages remain, and they are not spoken much for actual communication by ordinary people anymore. So learning a Latin like Latin or Sanskrit is very different from learning a language like Hindi or English. The thing is, English and Hindi are languages that are dynamic. They keep growing, they keep changing, and managing them and teaching them or learning them to use in various contexts can be very, very tricky. So if you learn all the grammatical features of Sanskrit, you can become a Sanskrit scholar. But it's very hard to keep up with English because the conventions, the pronunciation, the phrases, the idiom, the slangs that we use, the dialects that are there are ever changing. Every day there is some change happening here and there. So all these make learning a living language like English or Hindi as a second language rather difficult. As a first language, the challenges are not many because we learn it from our environment, we pick it up from our parents. It's fine. We are immersed in it naturally. But when it comes to a second language, that natural immersion doesn't happen. So the difference is that we learn Latin or Sanskrit as languages of scholarship, while we want to learn English or Hindi for use in real context. So we are aiming at basic communication to advanced communication. So it's for actual communication that we are attempting to learn English or Hindi. That's about acquiring a second language, the challenges involved. And coming to teaching a second language, in the former slide, I was talking about learning a second language. Coming to teaching a second language, teaching a second language is different from teaching a first language. So here, by second language, I mean a language that is today widely used. So we'll zero in on English now. So whenever I talk about second language, let's say I have English in mind particularly. So teaching a second, when it comes to teaching a second language, it's very different from teaching a first language. First, we all know this. These are all facts that we all are very clearly known to us. So, when it comes to teaching a first language, for example, teaching Malayalam to Malayalis, our focus is on encouraging the learners to acquire the literature, learn a few poems in the language, so that we kind of work on their finer aspects, the aesthetic aspects of the individual. It's largely literature-based. And when it comes to communication, they already have rather manageable or rather appreciable level of basic communicative skills. We are talking about the first standard or second standard student, the 8-year-old or the 7-year-old student. He has basic level of communication, but our orientation will be towards pushing them to higher levels of communication. But when it comes to second language, that is not the case. That is not the case. Very often we also focus we lay a lot of our focus on literature teaching in second language as well, even the lower levels, where again, it shows our own lack of clarity in what we are attempting to do. I'm not saying there should not be literature in the lower level, but very often it doesn't seem to work somehow, our focus, I mean. And very often people assume that if you are a good user of a language, you will also be correspondingly a good user of a good teacher of the language. So I am involved in several teaching adult learner programs in Kerala, and also I've been involved in other parts of the country as well, where often a good user of language assumes that he can be a good teacher of language, which is a very dangerous thing, I would say. I have a community of teachers where there are many very good users of English, but when they discuss the nuances of teaching, I often observe that there are serious issues. They bring to bear their own linguistic knowledge and linguistic prejudices on the learners, which in fact impede the learning process. And I suspect that it is often the teachers' prejudices about learning or acquiring language that often causes the impediment in the path of learning. So this is something I'd like to stress. A good user of English need not be a good teacher of English, because primarily because the learning strategies that a person has, which varies with his personality, which may not work with other learners. So my learning strategies may not work when I try to teach somebody. So my teaching strategies should be different. Generally, it has to be different, and also when because language learning habits are different from individual to individual. My teaching strategies also have to adapt to such the variety of the learner abilities or learner preferences, learner styles, etc. And also very often in teaching a second language, we forget the emotive factors related to language use. Learning a language is not like learning a subject. We all know that. So for example, if I am a very introverted person and I am easily hurt by other challenges in the classroom or in an environment outside my personality, I can be a good learner of history, for example, using entirely listening to lectures, sitting in a corner, never opening my mouth, never interacting with my fellow beings, and spending my time in the library and spending my time at my computer. I can be a good learner of history, a good learner of physics, a good learner of mathematics. But when it comes to an applicational thing where a social group is needed, the problems are very different. The emotive aspects come in. We all know that every individual is highly complex and highly egoistic. I'm not saying using that word in a negative way. We are all very much worried about our personalities, or the way we are affected by the manners of others, how we respond to the challenges all around, which happens constantly in every human interaction. Every day you have this kind of emotive aspect coming up. And in language learning, particularly second language learning has to happen in context, interacting with other learners. And there the emotive aspect becomes very, very important. And unless the teacher is very, very much aware about the individual learner and his or her emotive aspects, the teaching becomes a major concern, major challenge. And then the effectiveness is seriously affected. So that is the teacher factor in ESL, which I'm now working on the aspect of teacher. The factors, learner factor is there, the teacher factor is there. And I'm looking at the teacher factor in English, learning English or teaching English as a second language. We often say that in the language class, particularly, the teacher is no longer a teacher. Teacher is a facilitator. I would say that teacher is not a facilitator either. That becomes a very mechanical task. Certainly, the teacher's job is not to teach, but to facilitate language learning. Certainly, that is acceptable. But I would say that it's highly reductive to say that the teacher is no longer a teacher, but she or he has become a facilitator. I would say the role is much more complex. It's more organic. And it's a much more composite role that the teacher has. A teacher is a teacher, certainly. And teacher facilitates learning. He or she also does so many other things. He or she supports the learner emotionally. He or he mentors the students. He or she participates in the learning process. And above all that, I would say the teacher is the most important resource in the classroom. Particularly in the English language classroom, I would say that the teacher is the biggest resource. The teacher is the biggest model. The teacher is so many things. But there are, we all know that in learning a language, learning a second language, a teacher need not be there. You can learn a language totally without having a teacher. That is possible. Any subject can be learned like that. But I would say having a teacher is eminently convenient. And also, when we talk about large number of learners, definitely teachers are perhaps the most important factor. Though we have to keep in mind that the teacher is an optional component in teaching. But let that be. the teacher could very often, I have felt that in the language classroom, the teacher turns out to be a major hindrance. This is something that I've mentioned already. The teacher, with his or her prejudices, with or her inadequate knowledge about how to handle a second language class, often hinders learning process. Forgive me for sounding negative, but from my nearly 3 decades of teaching, I have often found that many learners are shy away from using language, primarily because of the teacher's insistence on correctness, or the teacher reprimanding the learner for making mistakes. I once did a survey with some of my students, and I remember one student commenting that if my teacher appreciated or supported me more and corrected me less, maybe I would have become a better user of language. So the teacher factor is very crucial. So moving away from just the teacher role, imagining that you have something to teach, you do not have something to teach. And you are not a facilitator, you are not a mechanical person. You are much more than that. You are the most important person in the room, and you are the biggest resource in the room. So with that responsibility, we have to take in the right sense. So and perhaps after the learner, the teacher is the most important factor. Important in the sense, most crucial factor, most determining factor, and the factor that needs a lot of focus on. That is why I talk about teacher development needs. So I'd like to define the word teacher development. Teacher development is very similar to teacher training, though training would precisely mean a program in which certain goals are set and those are achieved or not achieved. But development is a process that is continuous, I would say. Continuous. And development is all round. It's a holistic kind of thing. It is not teachers' knowledge of the content. That is important. Teachers' knowledge.
Excuse me, we have some interruption from someone presenting, and we have requested in the beginning that please don't present or share your screen, and you are not permitted. So please, Mr. or Miss Tabassum, Miss Tabassum, please, Tabassum Mullah, stop presenting and interrupting the speaker. Yes, Professor Lar, you can start presenting again and share your screen.
Apologies, Professor Lal, if you can kindly share your screen once again and pick up from where you left off. Apologies, sir, if you can kindly unmute your mic as well. We can see the screen now.
Okay. Okay, I hope I'm visible.
Yes, sir, you're visible. If you can kindly share your screen once more. Excellent. Yeah, it's now visible, sir. Please go ahead.
Fine. And sorry, sir, for the interruption.
It's okay. It often happens. I'm sorry. I can understand. And am I audible also?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll continue. I won't take much time. We were talking about teacher development. I was saying that teacher development is a continuous process, and it is not like training, which can be a short thing. And a training can be part of a teacher development thing. So teacher development is something, it has 2 phases: developing the teacher knowledge of the subject, and also sharpening the teacher's pedagogic skills. So it's the pedagogic skills that become more important. Both are important, but when a teacher knows how to manage, how to use his or her knowledge of the content, he or she becomes more effective. That is why the teacher development has many phases. It has, the psychological development of the teacher himself or herself. The knowledge of the learner is a very important thing, which we do not give much focus on in many of our training programs, I'm afraid. So that is about teacher development, how ideally it should happen. It should ideally be the regular feature of any learning program. But generally, what happens is in context that I formerly mentioned, we don't have a very structured or systematic ESL training machinery in place. We have many systems for teacher training. Certainly, we have academics. I'm talking about university education. In schools, they have more training machinery. But in the university level, we do have academic staff colleges, and even this conference that we are taking part is part of a teacher development endeavor. But we need to have specific teacher development programs for teaching second language, because teaching second language needs more skills, more specific skills than most other teaching programs. Teaching contents of various kinds. Compared to that, teaching a second language is more challenging, and teachers who do that need systematic and periodic training specific to teaching English as a second language. So which I say is lacking, and which is not likely to happen either, because due to many reasons. One is, very often that is not a big priority to many educational planners, and even when there are plannings, we have a dearth of efficient trainers or a training package which all needs our attention. I would say we are all ESL practitioners here. I think we should pay a lot more attention to developing teacher training modules and implementing it more systematically. There need to be FDP programs specifically for teaching second language English, and for second language teachers. The trainer, and what I observed once was that in a training program, we were talking at length about activity-based learning in language. And finally, when in the final implementation part, where the teachers were displaying their learning, what they learned, there were many activities in which the activities were all physical. The teachers were demonstrating activities. They went after the word activity. They forgot it was a language activity. There was even kind of an activities where in 5 minutes, no English was produced at all. So that is what happens when the trainers are deficient in the actual knowledge of what should be there, and which is cascaded down, which again causes more harm than good. So so the teacher development is a major topic that we need to address, which more focus more on, and beyond that, the teachers also need to be aware of their own needs. So very often teachers, young teachers, particularly who complete their PG and enter a college or a university or any teaching program, teaching institution, they kind of assume that they are fully equipped. I, as a young teacher, remember I believed that I had all the equipment to be a good teacher. And particularly in delivering, encouraging learners to acquire language, because in teaching a content, suppose I want to teach aerodynamics, I can have my illustrations, my PowerPoints, my explanations, and the learners will be initiated into that, and then they will go ahead and complete their learning in the laboratory. But in the language class, that is not enough. I need to know precisely how to do that. So which is not easy. So very often the teachers are not aware that we have a deficiency, we have a lack in becoming more efficient teachers of English language. I myself did not realize that until about in the middle of the second decade into teaching. So, but in those days, we were not talking much about English language teaching also. So the teachers need to be aware of their need for development. And I'm concluding in this slide and the next, the teacher development initiatives from the part of the system may not happen all the time. So what is important is what perhaps we can do is for teachers to be motivated on their own to develop themselves. As I said, an English teacher needs to constantly be reading, constantly be listening to different varieties of English. So that is, we develop our own idiomatic language, and accepting the fact that English is now so various, so different, so many different varieties of English coexist in the world, and we cannot have a single model. That makes matters more challenging. So as teachers, it's our very important need to expose ourselves to different models of English. So we have YouTube, we have many other channels through which we can listen to a lot of varieties of English. And also, you know, we need to read different discourses, different kinds of discourse, not only the newspaper or the books that we usually read. We need to explore into different kinds of written material so that we keep improving ourselves. And there is no dearth of material either. We have, with ICT, there is never any dearth of reading or listening material. In addition to that, even though the government or the agency that has employed us do not have, doesn't have a particular teacher training course for you, we can look up, we can find out development courses. There are many online teacher development courses available in edX and Coursera, etc. You can explore teacher development programs specifically for ESL teachers. Yes, that is one possibility. And we can also opt for a certificate course like PGCT offered by EFL in Hyderabad is there. And there could be many other agencies who offer good quality courses. So only when you do such a thing that our PG in English or our MPhil in English become more meaningful for our learners, because our learners are our prime concern. And there is TKT, which is Teaching Knowledge Test, which is a test conducted by Cambridge University, which you might find rather expensive. So still, if you think it is, it's worth doing, there are course material available. You can learn the course material. Even if you don't take the test, those course materials are very good. I'll show you an image of that, of a book. So, and also we need to be very clear, teachers, we need to be very clear that the learning doesn't happen from books. English learning doesn't happen by learning a grammar book or following a book on how to develop your vocabulary. Language happens only through immersion in that language. So English, to learn English, you need to immerse yourself in that language in all ways. You know, you need to talk in English. You need to listen to English. You need to read English as much as possible and write in English. Only immersion will make you a good user of language. So this is a knowledge that we need to have so that we can cascade it down to the learners. So so that is about, even if you don't do any course, there are books that are available. These are some books that I have regularly used to improve my English language teaching skills. So this is TKT here, which is, as the test I said, Teaching Knowledge Test, Cambridge. This book is not very expensive. This TKT Indian edition is available. Even if you don't take the test, this is a useful book, very useful book for English language teachers. And Learning Teaching by Jim Scrivener is another very practical. These are not theoretical books. You won't find any theoretical expressions. These won't help you in a PhD program in linguistics or teaching, but this will help you a lot in your action in the class. By Jim Scrivener is a very good, offers a teacher training book. And a course in English language teaching, Penny, or again an Indian edition is available, which is very inexpensive. And Practice of English Language Teaching by Jeremy Harmer is another excellent book. Well, I would say the second and the third would be a bit expensive, coming about 2,000 rupees, I think. But the other two are available online. But still, we teachers, there is nothing wrong in investing money on paid courses. Don't look always for free courses. Even paid online courses are worth doing, because we need to keep up with the changing times. So that is all I have to say today, considering that we don't have much time. And I would like to respond if there are any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Lal. Indeed, you have offered us invaluable practical insights into tools and methods, as well as hindrances that face teachers of English as a second language. Just to clarify, Dr. Amin, are we taking questions for this plenary session?
Well, thank you, Mr. Pascal. First of all, let's send a big thank you letter to our beloved Professor Lal for the wonderful and insightful lecture for today. In fact, we don't receive questions in these plenary sessions, but if there are some participants who are interested to raise questions, they can send to the conference email, and then we will contact with Professor Lal, and of course, he will provide an informative responses. So with this, we come to the end of the first talk, and now we will move to the second talk for Madame Mansi. She will speak from the United States of America, specifically from the University of Texas. So we would like to welcome her, and Mr. Pascal, you can do the formalities.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. We also have an introducer for Professor Bajaj. So moving on to the fifth plenary lecture of this conference. This lecture will be delivered by Professor Mansi Bajaj, and Professor Bajaj is joining us from the United States. To introduce Professor Bajaj, I invite Dr. Al-Munira J, who is an assistant professor in the Department of English, University College, Thiruvananthapuram. So Dr. Al-Munira, if you're there, please, madam.
Thank you, Bhaskar. Good morning, one and all. It's my privilege to introduce Ms. Mansi Bajaj from USA. She is a lecturer of foreign languages in the Department of Asian Studies, University of Texas. And she is working on, her research work is on stress placement in Punjabi, and she is teaching Hindi as a foreign language. On behalf of the conference team, I welcome you, ma'am, for your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your introduction, and thank you for organizing this conference. Professor Lal has pretty much spoken about a lot of things that I actually wanted to talk about, so I should really thank him for that. And I was actually taking notes while he was speaking, because he's really given a very good a talk on on teaching foreign languages. However, Professor Lal teaches Hindi, and he teaches English and I teach Hindi, but both the languages being foreign language, like we teach both the languages as second language to the students, so that pretty much makes it the same process basically, or we could use the same methodologies. Yeah, I am sharing my screen, and I just want to make sure that, can you see it now? Okay. Yeah, you should be. Okay.
Yeah, please give it a moment. Yeah, it's coming on now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, yes, I am talking about teaching a foreign language, and to be specific, how to teach a foreign language online. With the things having gone online, everybody seems to have some apprehensions, and then there's a hesitation on how to approach this. So just to give a little informal, like my viewpoint on whatever little I have understood in the last few months. So the discussion will be in two parts. I'm not going to call it a presentation. It's more of a discussion in my head, because I'm just sharing my thoughts and I would be open to listen to yours. So it'll be in two sections. The first one is like, how should we approach online classes, especially because they are language classes. And then second is, what are some of the project-based tasks or activities that can be used for online language classes. As Professor Lal just very correctly pointed out, that sometimes the tasks or activities that that scholars or even teachers think of, they just become very physical, and there's no real use of language. So we're going to focus on like some of the tasks that I use personally in my class, and I think we did use some language. So probably we're going to take feedback from you all later. So the first thing, of course, I know that this was a very sudden change and it did come to each one of us as a shock. However, looking at it as something that is being forced on us, that we've been pressured to teach online, it is not something that we're looking for. Instead, if we look at it as an opportunity, then the whole approach or whole way of looking at it would change probably. Instead of just being like, instead of trying to reduplicate your in-person classes, whatever you were doing in person, you're trying to bring it to online classes. Instead of doing that, why not we use some of the resources that we have readily available? I mean, I'm really talking about resources that we have been using all this while, the resources which are right in front of us, the resources that the students have access to, and they're probably better than us at it. Instead of just, really trying to find new apps and new softwares, which of course, if somebody can do, I would be happy to see that. But there's so much that we can do with whatever we just have with us right now. So only by just focusing on a project or task-based learning instead of giving them the usual assignments and trying to just duplicating or just like copying literally your classes from in person to moving it online, which probably is just going to make it boring and just another class that maybe the students don't want to walk to. So with the classes moving online, there are a few things that we need to do before we take on any approach. So the first would be to reevaluate what are the teaching methodologies and what are the assignments, what are all the what are the techniques that you were using in your class. So once you reflect on it, then is the time you engage, you look what resources you have available without really trying to learn a lot of new things. You can see what is it that interests your students, what is it that your other colleagues are using, and then you can start assessing. Like you have to see what technologies you can see what assignments or rather projects or tasks you can use for your class. And then of course somehow assessment is part of the way our classes work. So you have to also see whatever you are thinking of, whatever plans you're making, how are you going to assess or how are you going to grade students. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more in later. And then of course just retool it and revamp all your classes. Instead of what are the things that you can keep from your in-person classes, what are the things that totally need to be gone, and what are the things that just need a little bit of revamping, and then it could bring some spice in your class. So yes, our primary job is to create a desire to learn in our students. And how do we do that? You have to, before you give any task to the students, instead of just being like, oh, do this and do that, why not we give them authentic input, language input, which is in target language, of course, as a prompt, so that so that the students know what exactly are you expecting. After you have that, you give them the ready vocabularies for whatever task that you're going to give. You are going to expose them to different contexts so that they get comfortable using different kind of vocabularies for different situations, and hence accomplishing all the objectives, instead of just being like, oh, this is how grammar works. This is what we're going to do. And just coming up with random tenses, and there's no situation, there's no background, there's no context to it. Instead, just have proper one task, focusing on one maybe aspect of grammar or just use of language, without them even realizing. They're just learning it, and there's a motivation in them. They want to use the language, they have an input, and then they start producing output. Of course, very important aspect is not that activity should not be something like that they are just doing. It should not be something that they just read. It needs to have all the components to it, if you ask me. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening, all four. It's all very important to include all four. And then it is very important, of course, to get the students comfortable. They're trying to learn a new language. They're trying to come out of their comfort zone. You are literally putting them on the spot in a language class. That is why they have this hesitation. That's why they do not speak up. That is why they They do not want to participate in the class. That's why the thing that teacher is actually kind of, that is how the teacher becomes hindrance, and instead you can become a support for them if you make them comfortable with the fact that mistake is the best mistake, and mistake is what is acceptable. It's not acceptable, rather it is encouraged, because there's no way anybody can learn. And tell them, you may be a teacher, you may be facilitator, or whatever you want to call yourself, you are going to make mistakes too. You are as human, you are as much a learner as they are. So that it's very important to get that. And then of course create a very light, I would say, learning environment. And then so that they don't feel like they're being put on spot, and then they're comfortable speaking to you in the class, or they're comfortable sharing their thoughts in the class, or using the language in the class. So so we move to the second part. That is, there's some of the tasks or activities that I'm going to, or project-based learning that I'm going to highlight, which I use in my classes. So the first is interview project. When we had in-person classes, what we were doing is the students used to go home, and then they used to interview, they used to find out something, read something online, come and report it to the class. Instead, what they did this time is they had two options. One, if somebody in the family or friends could speak the same language, they could interview them and record that interview to be shown in the class to everybody. The second is if they did not have access to anybody who spoke the same language that we are targeting. In that case, they could interview them in some other language. Of course, you decide what the topic for the interview is going to be, and you give it to them. So they interview them in another language, another common language, and then they make a video report of it, like basically a news report or a video report, which will now be in the target language. And then there'll be concluding remarks in that. Now, so for example, they first record their, so how I approached it is, they recorded their video first, after which I gave them feedback. After the feedback was given that at this time, this is what it should be. So the point is, of course, not to freak them out and tell them that, let's say, this is what I do, that your assignment or your project is, suppose 10 marks. So out of that, if you submit your work on time, you get 8 points straight away. And if you make the corrections and you resubmit, you get the other 2 points. So that way you are correcting them, but then they're not freaking out. It's not like, if I get it this right, I get 3 points, somebody's getting 4, depending, you're basically trying to categorize them, and you're trying to create some sort of hierarchy, which is probably not one of the best ideas. So instead, what if there's motivation for everybody to learn, and then if they want to get the last 2 points, suppose, or 20% of the grade, which is pretty much a lot, so they just make the corrections. And if they're making the corrections, which means they are going to see what mistakes they made, and they're going to review it without even wanting to. So, and then they give you the second recording. That was one task we did. And so how do we assess? Like this was the assessment, but then how do we get students to hear? This is what they spoke. But then we also have to get them to speak. After speaking, we also have to get them to listen. We also have to get them to read or write, right? So from each student's recording, I gave them 3 questions. You could give less or more depending on how many students are there in your class. The questions do not have to be memorization based. The questions can be something very general, because your aim is just to make them listen to the recordings. It is not to get them to memorize what the other person say, or really get into the details of what they said. And they should even have access to the recording even when they're writing the answers. So for example, when I'm, let's say, writing, why is it that I should not be able to hear what I heard again? So that way I get more and more opportunities to listen, right? That way I get more and more opportunities to learn. And then you write the answer, you read the question. So that includes all the 4 skills that we target. And then of course, comprehension, which is the top of all 4. So another project that we indulged in was the semester end project that we used to have. Earlier, we used to have an individual project. So students would talk about at the end of the semester, they would give a written report. They would do a little research on one topic of their choice. They would come and give the presentation to everybody in the class, the cliche, which is what everybody does, right? Instead, this time, since we had the online mode, what we did is that the students, they could work on a story. So there was a prompt that was given to them. As I said, I will not show you the entire video. I will show you just a little bit. So because as I said, my class, like my target language is Hindi. So however, this video is not completely in Hindi. It has a couple of different languages, but that's fine because I kept the what do you call it? Captions on or subtitles on. I'm not sure if it is on right now, but it's probably okay. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video right now that the Bollywood stars made while they were still social distancing and they were all at their homes. I'll just play it for, let's say, a minute.
अरे सुनो, अरे सुन रही हो? वो मेरा काला चश्मा कहाँ है? डार्क ग्लासेस मिल नहीं रहा है. सुन रही हो? ओ इस घर में मेरी कोई सुनता ही नहीं है. शहंशाह बुलाते रहेंगे और मैडम भाषा सुनती रहेंगी. नहीं ढूंढता. वो कहाँ गया इनका काला चश्मा? सुन रही हो? ओ बरमीना, कोई और तो सोचती थी पांडव. ओए, पागल हो गया पाजी. सोना होना मैं. ओ वीरे अंकल का काला चश्मा घूम गया. उस जरा हेल्प कर ढूंढ ले. मैं क्यों मदद करूं? तू उठाए तू जा. मैं सो रहा हूं. गुड नाइट. पर अब तू
So I'll skip to the last. Okay. So this is the video that I had shown to my students as a prompt, like what they could do. And then this is the video that my students finally created. And it seems that's going to be. Well, it seems there's internet connection problem, so I'm just gonna explain it to you instead. So my students made a video of themselves while they were all at their own homes, just like the Bollywood stars, and then it was basically a story. So you divide your class in a few groups, and each group has to make a movie on any of the themes that they want to, and or you could specify themes for them if there is something that you are particularly targeting on. And then, so there were points for each of these steps that they did, and this will pretty much tell you what exactly they did. So they did the script writing on Google Document, and then there was a deadline to write all the lines to receive full points. So they get straight away 10 points if they do their part of the dialogues. And after that, you give them feedback on how they have used the language. That way, they know where they're going wrong. They know it already. They have some feedback. That's motivation. And then they can correct it before they even record themselves. After you give them the feedback, they can make revisions to it on the basis of the feedback that you just gave. And if they make revisions, they get, let's say, straight away 10 more points. After that, they make the final product, which is that they record the video and they compile it to make a short movie. Of course, it does not have to be professional. It does not have to be like how the Bollywood stars did, but it has to be something basic, just to put together some ideas. And trust me, the students were so excited. I had never seen them this excited before. So after they get this final product, they present it in the class. So we have a regular Zoom session or Google Meet session, and that's where they show their presentation, the whole group, and then they answer a few basic questions that maybe the other groups or I ask them, very basic, and then they get points on the basis of that too. So there are no points really on the basis of, like, you know, it's not like demotivating in the sense like oh, your marks would be cut if you make this mistake, your marks would be cut if you make that mistake. So they're already freaking out. They do not have the liberty to ask or anything. They're getting instead feedback so that they can work on their mistakes without having their marks deducted for it. So there's only motivation to keep doing it. Even for making revisions, even for making corrections, there is motivation so that they go back and they review what they have done or what mistakes they have done, and they can learn from it. So yeah, so there's so teacher's job is to provide opportunities, and therefore you reduce the teacher's hindrance part, and instead, you know, motivation, encouragement comes in, and there's more the students themselves want to learn, probably there's going to be more desire to learn and use the language. Also because projects like this make it so much more interesting for them. So another thing that we did, it's pretty small and it's easy. So we used to have the regular, 1 minute extempore speech in the class. Instead of doing it in the class, where they used to take out slips from the hat, we just started doing it using a PowerPoint presentation. There was a grid on the front page. Student picks one of the numbers, you click that number, and that slide automatically takes you to one of the topics. So every number has a topic related to it. Whichever number they choose, you click that number and it takes you to the topic. So it's just basically random topics that they are choosing, and then they speak on it for 1 minute. They still feel it's fair enough. Otherwise, you would think they would be like, oh, she already had this topic decided for me to speak on. So, and yes, one more thing that I did with my class, that we used to write blogs, after half of the semester, just like the regular essays or the regular lake or reflection on something. Instead of doing the vlogs, we started to do, instead of doing blogs, we started to do vlogs. So they would record themselves answering something. So what is your take on something? Some prompt would be given, and then instead of writing about it, they recorded. So they were speaking the language, because somehow it just so happens when you're learning a new language, speaking and listening are two things which really need to be developed, probably, unless you are getting into professional writing, where your focus is more on writing than speaking. Of course, if the speaking improves, writing, because, as it is when you're learning a new language, writing gets a little better slightly, because you can read at your own pace. However, for speaking, there's always hesitation. You are taking a lot of pauses. When you're thinking, when you're speaking, you cannot think at the spur of the moment. So again, this time you could give them feedback and ask them to re-record. It does not really take much time, as much as it might sound, but that would give them more motivation, and they would feel more connected, in the class setup, and then they would really want to participate more. So just comparing the old way and the new way. Somehow, of course, I really miss being in person in person classes. However, I still feel that Zoom classes are not that bad, or the online classes are not that bad. So instead of following a syllabus, we are rather supplementing the syllabus. We are supplementing the themes, whatever themes we had, we are adding so much more to it. Instead of me giving them the material, I'm getting the material out of the students. I'm giving them one vocabulary which they can work around, and then they use the language. And of course, to do that, they have to do their own research, which includes reading. Instead of doing the usual stage play, they are this time now making videos and films. It's much more interactive. There's speaking and listening involved as well, and not just the reading and writing. And instead of being captive to whatever content they have agency. They're not just receiving the content, they're also creating a lot of content. And instead of repeating what we have been doing for so many years, what we've been doing for hundreds of years to teach new languages, we are now creating new opportunities. We are now coming up with new things for students, and hence getting in them Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear. You can conclude, ma'am, in 2 minutes, please. Unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I wonder if you were able to hear me the whole time. I believe so.
Okay. Yes, you were perfectly audible.
Right,
we just lost you in the last
I'll just
2
wind
seconds.
it up now. So
kindly unmute yourself, Professor Bajaj. You're still muted. Could you kindly unmute yourself? Yeah, okay. You're fine now. Please go ahead.
So instead of what they are doing, let's say in all the 500 other classes, they are doing something new in their language class, and then hence there would be excitement to even participate in the class. And instead of doing the regular, like, handwritten assignments where you're giving them fill in the blanks or just like answer the question, or some sort of written assignments, they are doing project-based learning, which is new, which is more exciting, and then it does really create the motivation, encouragement in the students to learn something new. If you have questions, you can ask me right now, or you can send me an email later at this email address that's mentioned. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Bajaj, for that truly hands-on practitioner's approach to how modern tools can be used, especially in today's online world, for making a real practical teaching approach for students. And I think the participants in this conference will have taken a lot from your hands-on assessment methods. And most of all, I think in your reiteration that it is desire, motivation, that needs to be maintained in a student. And I think you have re-emphasized Professor Lal's point that the professor must not be a hindrance in the classroom and must help give self-confidence to the students. Thank you very much, Professor Bajaj. We thank you once again for kindly participating.
Thank you for this opportunity to share some ideas, and then I would be, I really hope that you've got something, or everybody has got like little something. Thank you so much. I would note.
Thank you very much, dear ma'am, Nancy, speaking from the University of Texas in the United States of America. It was really a great experience, specifically that you have talked about the need of the hour, the need of the second, that teaching online becomes, now we are conducting conferences online. Until just the end of 2019, all our conferences were offline, but now everything goes online. So thank you for bringing such interesting up to the date.
I'm sorry, I'll just that's the good thing about being online. I could also join the presentation, and so many other people who would otherwise not have been able to.
Exactly. Thank you very much, specifically that you have enriched our knowledge on teaching the foreign language. So we are learning the language as a foreign language, and here in India as a second language in some cases. So you have a great experience in teaching the Hindi language in the United States, University of Texas, as a foreign language. So as an expert teacher in the field, we have also learned from your experience, from your presentation. Thank you very much, and we hope that we can see you next time and coordinate for interesting and future activities. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Now with this, we come to the end of the plenary session, and Mr. Pascal now